Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic. We've all got an answer. Let's do it. What's the most scared you have ever been? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I had a gun pointed at me back home, there were protests against the government going on, and I was in a rickshaw. A motorbike pulled up and gestured with a gun to say, "Get out." Needless to say, I ran for my life. Edit. We flew back to the UK 2 days later, and after coming home, read 2 people had been shot and killed in a similar scenario. I'm on medication for mental health issues. When this happened, I'd been on the same medication for some years and found it had always given me heart palpitations and a super increased heart rate for between half an hour and 2 hours after taking it. I googled it, and it turns out this was a very common side effect for this particular medication. After being told to increase the dosage by 100 milligrams, not in small increments, just a straight jump from 200 mg to 300 mg, I obviously found the increased heart rate after I'd taken it much worse. It got so bad that I was rushed to A&E twice in the middle of the night for potential heart attacks. But it wasn't being rushed to AE that was scary. What was absolutely terrifying was sitting, physically feeling my heart pounding away in my chest at such speed and with such force that I was terrified that each thumping beat would be its last. Sitting there in the middle of the night with my parents on the phone to the ambulance people, absolutely petrified that with that last beat, there would be this sudden stillness in my chest, thinking of the things I'd never get to say to my siblings, knowing there isn't a single thing I could do or change what had happened. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. When I was 16, I liked exploring abandoned buildings in the city. I would sometimes stumble into homeless people sheltering there. Most were genuinely surprised I'm there. Some were upset and asked or demanded that I leave, and some offered me a drink with them. But this one time, I invited a girl that I liked to join me on a little adventure. We went inside into a house that had been loosely closed off by construction fences all around. It seemed pretty empty at first, so we thought we'll take our time seeing what's inside. As I was walking through countless rooms, I saw what I thought to be a dead body with the side of my eye. I stopped and made a somewhat loud noise doing that. Then the dead body gets up, pulls out a screwdriver, and starts walking towards me while remaining silent. Man, that adrenaline rush? There was a split second where I thought I'd run, but then I remembered there's someone else with me. As flight wasn't an option, I punched the person right in his chin, and he was walking toward me, but not quite at a distance to reach my torso or head or neck with his arm. I was lucky he was smaller than myself, and I thought I'll have good chances provided he doesn't stab me. Didn't knock him out, but he lost his balance and tripped over. Immediately ran to get the girl, left the house, and forever stopped exploring abandoned buildings. Well, that's definitely a pretty good reason to retire from urban exploring. And good for not avoiding and abandoning that woman. Was swimming in a river with 3 of my cousins. Lightning storm hit. 2 of these cousins are unable to swim, with the youngest one being too short to cross the river by himself without being swept away. I grabbed the youngest one and swam or waded to the nearest land, an island in the middle of the river, and grabbed my dog out of the water. A couple seconds after all of us and both dogs had got onto the land, a lightning bolt struck so close that everything was temporarily blindingly bright, and the sound caused our ears to ring for a good bit afterwards. We had to wait that storm out for a bit, and stupidly decided to cross the river before the storm was over. Another living lightning bolt struck really close whilst we were crossing and caused my smallest cousin to trip and cut his face on one of the rocks. When I was a little kid, I used to cut through the woods and a field to get to my friend's house in the neighborhood. It was built into a wooded area, but they kept a lot of the trees and shit to give natural privacy, and it rocked. My friends know I cut through the woods, so started saying they saw Bigfoot and shit in the woods. Little kid me slightly thought Bigfoot might be real, but also knew there's no way he's in a neighborhood even if he is real, lol. Well, I go to head home for the night and it's pitch black out. Can't even see my hand in front of my face. I go running back through the woods and the field, and all of a sudden hear rustling and something run and then stop right in front of me, maybe 3 to 4 feet away. I froze. and I damn near shit my pants. That was the first time I ever had an adrenaline rush. Obviously, it was a deer, as we had a ton of those in our area, but little me thought back to the Bigfoot thing and it being pitch black. Being in a car crash in Africa caused by a drunk driver. They wouldn't treat my student as he was Maasai, so they wanted American dollars first. I had to sit with him and watch him die, powerless to do anything. I returned to England with a suspected broken back, but it turns out I have a congenital deformation. For about 2 weeks, I had emails from the driver threatening me not to tell the police what happened, and he was a lizard king. I will never forget my friend's eyes as he died. Rest in peace, Edward. Asian country, Chinese market street, early hours after having some food. Person I'm with causes an altercation with the very last vendor before we would be exiting the street and going to our hotel. The street is pretty much ran by the mafia, like most of the market stall streets. Out of every nook and cranny, loads of Chinese appear with weapons. As we were trying to calm the situation and pulling out whatever money we had to make it right, genuinely could have been killed over some stupid shit. Since that night, I no longer entertain even conversations with this person. When I was 5 or 6, my family lived in a home that was creepy. I started to have these dreams about playing with toys and someone would knock them down with a jolt and I would wake up to the bed shaking. I would cry and my mom would run in and she would tell me that it was just a bad dream and all the stuff parents tell you to calm you down. This went on for months. One night it happened again, but this time my mom didn't come or wake me up. The window of my bedroom was facing the street, and there was a street lamp that always shone through my window. I looked down at the light shining on the floor, and it started moving back and forth. I was so terrified. All of a sudden, something pulled me off the bed hard and was pulling me under the bed. I grabbed the bed pole and hung on for what seemed like forever. I remembered hearing nothing but my heartbeat racing. All of a sudden, my feet are released, and the light returns to normal. I got up and ran out of my room so fast. My dad brought in a priest from the local church the next day, and it never happened again. I can still remember that sheer terror I felt as if it was yesterday. I was traveling with my sister, brother-in-law, and 6-year-old nephew. We stopped at an interstate rest area. Myself and my nephew had to relieve ourselves, so we went to the men's room. My nephew finished before me. I told him to wait for me at the sinks. He didn't. For about 3 minutes, I couldn't find my nephew at an interstate rest stop. Turns out he had walked back to the car on his own, but for that 3 minutes, I had visions of him being abducted, and I was terrified, more horrified than I've ever been in my life. You know, that is true terror personified, because we can have all the supernatural stuff in the world, but if you're responsible for a child and all of a sudden that kid is missing, instant fear. When I was a teen, I was walking a railroad bridge over a creek when I heard the train coming. I ran as fast as I could for the side. The railroad ties were the perfect to match my stride. Once the bridge crossed over land, the distance between the ties increased and I tripped, banging my shin. Not wanting to die, I crawled on my hands and knees until I could roll over to the side of the embankment. Then I waited and waited and waited. It was a full 90 seconds until the train came. I totally could have simply walked fast off the tracks. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I was 12 and spent the weekends over at my grandparents' place. In the middle of the night, when I was asleep, I was woken up by a knock on the room's door. I looked at the time and saw it was around 4 a.m. I knew my grandparents must have been asleep still, so I almost shit my pants. When I gave no answer, the door opened anyways, and I saw 2 police officers walk in. At first I calmed down, but then I thought, have I done anything wrong? Which spiked my fear even more than before they came in. They didn't tell anything aside from, get up, get ready, we're taking you to your mom. And that's all they said. So I did just that. Got up, got dressed, and got into the car. They took me to my aunt's place, which confused me. And when I realized we're not driving the way to my home, I thought I was kidnapped by fake cops. I remember almost backing out from fear, but when they stopped and parked at my aunt's place, my fear sunk again, since I know where we are. And when I walk in, I see my mom, aunt, and my grandma standing next to each other in the living room. Once again, my fear spiked because I thought I had effed up badly. But then my mom approached me and told me that my father had taken his own life. All I remember from that moment is I was screaming at the top of my lungs, crying, trying to get away from everyone, hoping that all of this was just a terrible nightmare. but one of the police officers had grabbed me when I was trying to escape the apartment. And there I realized this was real. I then had to accept it was not a nightmare, and I had screamed and cried myself to sleep. Back in May, my mom asked me to stay home from church on a Sunday to ice my brother's birthday cake since his party was an hour after church. I was the only one home and saw everyone leave, so it was just the dog, the cat, and me all alone. Everything was going good until I heard someone run up the stairs at full speed. The kitchen is right beside the stairs that led to the basement. As I bolted right out the front door, came back in, everything was fine for 5 minutes or so until I heard something trying to imitate a cat's meow to lure my cat down to the basement. Scared the shit out of me since I was the only one there, and not once did anyone enter the house. The back door leads right downstairs, and the front door cuts through the open living room we have and right to the kitchen. When I was 9, me and my parents were on vacation to Spain, to a place we've never been before. It was alright. One day there were some guys making a lot of noise while it was pretty late and people were trying to sleep. My dad went to them to ask if they could keep the noise down. Apparently these guys got extremely offended. They had a knife on hand and started chasing my dad. Luckily they were really slow, probably because of drugs or alcohol. If it weren't for that, my dad might have died. He ran home quickly and got inside on time. The guys were climbing over the gate right onto the property. They started bonking against the windows, trying to open them and get inside, and just completely demolishing everything outside. They threw lounge chairs into the pool, broke the gate down, and made a few cracks in the window. Obviously, I heard all the bonking and ran downstairs. Me and my parents were standing there in the middle of the living room, trying to call the police as quick as possible. It took a while for them to get there. Holy shit was I scared. Turns out the neighborhood had a pretty high crime rate. No one told us when buying the house. I mean, not a good way to advertise, but could have at least given a warning. Yeah, it seems like in another country, you feel a little bit more vulnerable if you're not exactly used to everything and all your surroundings. So glad you guys worked out and came out okay. When I was in high school, I was in bed and thought I heard voices outside my bedroom window. Moments later, I heard banging and slamming sounds from downstairs. I honestly thought my dad had a stroke or a heart attack and fell down the stairs. My dad's a big guy, think John Goodman built, and it was that loud. In reality, the voices I had heard were from people casing our house. Someone had just walked into our unlocked back door at 10 p.m. and into the house. My dad was in the basement and knew everyone was in bed or headed that way, so he snuck upstairs and caught some random dude going through my mom's purse in the dining room, roughed him up, and the guy ran out of the house with the purse and threw it in the backyard. Police showed up with a bloodhound. This was one of several home break-ins in our neighborhood at the time. To this day, I constantly lock doors behind me, to the point where I've locked my partner out of the house multiple times because I'm still that paranoid.